On page 136, the final bit we've got in this chapter is talking about IT systems. Security. When we have got a computer system, particularly a transaction processing system, if it's damaged, in other words, the transactions get lost, we can't do anything. Imagine going into your F3 exam and you've got to try and do some work on preparing part of a balance sheet, and for some reason somebody's scribbled over all the numbers that you need. Well, you wouldn't be able to do anything. You couldn't do the question. Well, that's what we're talking about here. With a transaction processing system, that's the basic data that everything else comes from. MISs and all the rest of them are based on that transactions. If the transactions are lost, we can't do anything. So we need to make sure that our computer system is guarded against physical damage. Computers are fussy. If they get too hot, if they get too cold, if they get wet, then they will basically stop working. What happens if all of our transactions are stored on that computer and we can't get it to work? Human damage. That could be deliberate, going in and changing the numbers. There's an invoice for 1,000, I'll go in and change it to 100. So it could be deliberate, it could be accidental. Again, if we can't rely on the transactions, we can't do anything else, we can't run a company properly. Operational problems. It might be that our computer is adding things up in the wrong way. So we have said, add up all of the invoices for this particular customer, and perhaps we've programmed something wrong and it adds up all the invoices for a different customer. So actually it's giving us the right number, but it's answering the wrong question. So it's giving us the right number, but for the wrong customer. So it could be operational things. Now the big problem with operational problems is, of course, the fact that they're often very difficult to spot, particularly if the computer's doing something very complex. We probably don't understand what it's doing. We don't know what the right number is, so we don't know when it's wrong. And finally, data corruption. Again, what we're talking about there is we've got our data which has somehow perhaps been altered or perhaps has just disappeared. So it just is no longer there. We may have somebody who's hacked into our system and changed the numbers, or perhaps has, erased them. There is no information left at all. Final couple of bits, we've got spreadsheets and databases, because these are common things that are now used in organisations. A spreadsheet, and I'd be very surprised if you've never used a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are used widely by finance because obviously they are particularly good for numerical things. They are simple, little training, widely recognised. There are certain spreadsheets, there are certain programs like Excel that are just known and used by millions upon millions of people around the world. And they're great, as I said earlier, for doing things like what if. They're great for just adding things up. They're great for doing simple calculations. The trouble is that they are not particularly flexible if you want to analyse the information in lots of different ways. So they're quite good for doing simple things, but if you've got hundreds of thousands of pieces of data that you want to analyse in lots of different ways, and remember, a company like a supermarket, if it records every single thing that it sells in every single store, we'll be getting millions of bits of data every single day. Spreadsheets just can't cope with that, it's too much. So databases are, it says, a collection of data which can then be manipulated. All that means is the data is all stored in one place and I can analyse it in different ways, so I can get bits of information from it. And the key things that we have here, the benefits, you only need to store the data once, so it doesn't need to be duplicated. It means that because of that, you only have to keep one set of data secure, rather than having lots of different spreadsheets that you've got to worry about. Greater flexibility. Spreadsheets are very, very flexible. But databases are even more flexible. You can do a lot more stuff with them. So we might not even know yet what we want to do with our data. And finally, consistency means that you can basically write a little database program so everybody uses it in the same way. So databases tend to have programs that you can write to get the data out. The only trouble with that is there will be issues with security because everything's in one place and everybody accesses it. Whereas with a spreadsheet, we might have lots of different spreadsheets, but with a database, everybody accesses the same one. So if it goes wrong for everybody. There is no privacy anymore, because everybody accesses the same thing. Databases are more complicated. Now, I can program a relatively sophisticated spreadsheet in Excel. I don't really understand how to do database programming. I'm trying to teach myself, but I don't really understand it yet. So the trouble is, spreadsheets, although they are not as complicated, they're very easy to get going with. Databases, you have to learn a lot before you can do anything. And they're more costly. So which one is better? It depends what you're going to use it for. A small company probably just does a spreadsheet. Large multinational, probably some kind of database. So in that particular chapter, we've talked about what kind of information you need. Is it data or is it information? How can IT help you? MISs, ESSs, etc., etc. And finally, the difference between a spreadsheet and a database.